In 2027, we are returning to Middle-earth on the big screens. The Hunt for Gollum is coming to theaters, directed by Andy Serkis, with Viggo Mortensen potentially reprising his role as Aragorn. And if you think this is merely a side story, a gap filler between the main tales, you are about to discover why this hunt may be the most important untold story in all of Tolkien's legendarium. Because here's what most viewers will not know when they sit down in those theaters. They will not be watching a side quest. They will be watching the invisible war that saved Middle-earth. A war that lasted 17 years. A war that Aragorn fought alone in the crawling dark of forgotten marshes and nameless forests, while the fate of the free peoples hung by a thread. Today, we lift the cinematic veil. We reveal what Peter Jackson's 30-second montage could only hint at. And by the time we are done, you will understand why catching Gollum was not just important, it was Aragorn's greatest feat as a ranger. So settle in. This is the story the new film must tell, and you are about to become one of the few who truly understands what is at stake. But before we continue, if you're new here or haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing, as it really helps the channel out. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Let us begin with what you have already seen. In the Two Towers, during Gandalf's recounting at Fangorn, we glimpse Aragorn tracking Gollum. Rain falls, feet splash through the dead marshes. A creature scurries through shadow. Aragorn's hand closes around a throat. 30 seconds, perhaps 40. It is beautiful, efficient, but it is also necessarily incomplete. The books tell a different story. And this is what The Hunt for Gollum has the opportunity to finally show us on screen. The hunt did not take weeks. It did not take months. It took 17 years. 17 years. From the moment Gandalf first began to suspect Gollum's importance around the year 3000 of the Third Age, to when Aragorn finally delivered the creature to the Wood Elves in 3018. 17 years of grinding, relentless pursuit. 17 years of sleeping in the wild, of following trails that went cold for months, even years at a time. 17 years during which Aragorn, already burdened with protecting the Shire and defending all of Eriador, had to hunt a creature who left almost no trace and trusted no living soul. This was not a hunt, this was a war. A silent, solitary war fought in the margins of history, in places that have no names, against an enemy that most believed was beneath notice. And if Aragorn had failed, if Gollum had reached Mordor before the Rangers found him, the enemy would have learned of Baggins, of the Shire, of Bag End. The Nazgûl would have ridden forth not in September of 3018, confused and searching, but years earlier, they would have arrived when Frodo was still unprepared, unwarned, unready. The hunt for Gollum was the dam that held back the dark flood, and Aragorn was the stone that would not break. When you watch the new film, you will see this truth unfold across 2 hours instead of 30 seconds. And you will finally understand. This was the silent war that saved the Shire. But here is the question the film must answer, and the question that haunts anyone who knows this tale. Why did it take 17 years to catch one miserable creature? If you think of Gollum only as the pitiful, broken thing we meet in the Two Towers, the wretched being mumbling to himself, arguing with his own reflection, you underestimate him catastrophically. And the new film has the chance to show us what the books always knew. Gollum was not merely a victim of the ring's corruption, he was a survivor. And survival, in Middle-earth's darkest corners, requires a terrible kind of genius. Consider what Gandalf tells us in The Fellowship of the Ring. When recounting Gollum's history at the Council of Elrond, the wizard says, "He was very old and very cunning. The Wood Elves had him in prison, but treated him with such kindness as they could find in their wise hearts." And yet, despite elvish vigilance, despite being held in the stronghold of Thranduil himself, Gollum escaped. He was allowed to climb trees under guard for fresh air, and one night he simply vanished. This was no lucky accident. This was calculated brilliance. Gollum had survived for 5 centuries in the roots of the Misty Mountains, alone, in absolute darkness. He had evaded the notice of Sauron's own servants, even as they scoured those same tunnels. He had learned to move without sound, to hunt without being hunted, to become shadow itself. And we must speak plainly about what those instincts drove him to do, because this is what makes him such a formidable quarry. Gandalf does not shy from the truth. There were many reports of queer things going on in that region. The waylaying of travelers, the devouring of children, and strange shapes seen in the night. Read that again. The devouring of children. Gollum was not merely hiding from his pursuers. He was hunting. The Wood Elves imprisoned him not for theft, but because the woodmen's children were disappearing, taken in the night, devoured by something that left no trace. This is the creature Aragorn was tasked to find, not a coward, not a simple wretch, a predator, a ghost who had spent half a millennium learning to live in the cracks of the world, feeding on the unwary, leaving no witnesses. To track such a being across the wilds of Rovanion, through the labyrinth of the Emyn Muil, across the poisoned waters of the Dead Marshes, to follow a trail that went cold for months at a time in territories where even the bravest men feared to tread, this required more than skill. It required obsession. It required the kind of relentless, unyielding will that defines the Dunedain at their finest. And still, Gollum eluded him. For 17 years. When The Hunt for Gollum arrives in theaters, pay attention to how they portray this creature. If they show him as merely pathetic, they will have missed the point. Gollum must be terrifying. He must be the shadow that mothers warn their children about. Only then will you understand what Aragorn achieved. Now we arrive at the truth that even devoted readers of Tolkien often miss, and this is what I hope the new film will make undeniable. Catching Gollum was not a footnote in Aragorn's biography. It was not a minor errand, a side quest between his larger deeds. It was, arguably, his greatest accomplishment as a ranger. I know what you are thinking. What about his years fighting in Rohan and Gondor? What about leading the Grey Company through the paths of the dead? What about the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, or commanding the host of the West at the Black Gate? Those are the deeds that shine in the Chronicles. Those are the moments of visible heroism, the tales sung in the halls of men. But consider what Gandalf himself says. When recounting the search at the Council of Elrond, the wizard admits, "And then at last, when I had given up hope, I got news from the most unlikely source. Aragorn had at last laid hands on the creature." Pause on those words. When I had given up hope. Gandalf, one of the Maiar, bearer of Narya, the Grey Pilgrim who had walked Middle-earth for thousands of years, had given up. His network of informants had failed. His communion with birds and beasts had yielded nothing. His long wisdom, accumulated across ages, could not find this one wretched creature. But Aragorn succeeded. He succeeded because he understood something fundamental about the hunt. It is not about following footprints. It is about becoming your prey. Aragorn had to think like Gollum, had to imagine where a creature of shadow and hunger would flee when pressed, where he would hide when wounded, what forgotten ruins or forsaken marshes might shelter him when all the world seemed to be searching. And Aragorn did this while maintaining his other duties, while guarding the Shire from threats the hobbits never saw, while ranging across Eriador, while serving as Gandalf's eyes and ears throughout the wild lands of the north. The hunt for Gollum was conducted in the margins of an already overburdened life. When Aragorn finally cornered that slippery, desperate creature in the Dead Marshes, near the very borders of Mordor itself, when he seized Gollum in the dark after nearly 2 decades of patient, grinding pursuit, it was the culmination of a masterwork of craft and endurance. It was proof that he was not merely a skilled tracker. He was the greatest hunter of the Third Age. This is why Gandalf trusted him above all others. This is why the Fellowship followed him without question. Not because he carried the blood of Númenor, but because he had already proven in the silent places of the world that his will was unbreakable. When you watch The Hunt for Gollum, watch for this. Watch for the moments when Aragorn loses the trail, when he doubts, when he wants to give up, because those moments will show you who he truly is. Not when he succeeds, but when he continues anyway. But there is one final layer to this tale. One element that transforms it from a story of persistence into a tragedy of timing. And if the new film captures this, it will break your heart. Aragorn was not the only one searching for Gollum. The Nazgûl were hunting him too. After Gollum's escape from Mirkwood in 3017, Sauron's servants began their own pursuit. They knew Gollum had been captured by the elves. They knew he had been tortured in Barad-dûr years before, babbling under torment about Baggins and Shire. And when word reached Mordor that Gollum had escaped, Sauron correctly deduced that the creature would eventually seek his precious, or, failing that, seek revenge on the thief who had stolen it. This was not a casual search. This was a Cold War race, with the fate of the ring itself hanging in the balance. If the Nazgûl found Gollum first, they would tear every scrap of knowledge from his mind. They would learn the exact location of Bag End, the name of Bilbo Baggins, the existence of an heir. They would ride to the Shire not as confused hunters asking farmers about Baggins, but as executioners with a precise target. Frodo would have had no warning, no time to flee. The quest of the ring would have ended before Gandalf even knew it had begun. Aragorn barely won this race. The timeline is chilling when you examine it closely. Aragorn captured Gollum and delivered him to Thranduil's halls in early 3018. By summer of that same year, the Nazgûl had crossed the Anduin and begun their hunt in earnest. By September, they were in the Shire, terrifying hobbits and searching for Baggins. The margin of victory was months, not years, not decades, months. If Aragorn had been slower, if he had lost Gollum's trail one more time in the Emyn Muil, if he had searched the wrong section of the Dead Marshes, if he had rested even one additional week in Rivendell, the Nazgûl would have found Gollum first, and the darkness would have won. This is the tragedy at the heart of the hunt. For most of those 17 years, Aragorn did not know he was in a race. He could not have known that Sauron's shadow was closing in behind him, that every day of delay brought the enemy closer to total victory. He simply endured. He trusted that the task mattered, even when the trail went cold, even when Gandalf himself had abandoned hope. And in the end, that faith, that grim, patient, unyielding endurance saved everything. When the hunt for Gollum shows you Aragorn finally capturing that creature, I want you to remember this. He was not just hunting Gollum, he was racing the Nine. And he won by mere months. If the film can make you feel that weight, that terrible, suffocating pressure of time running out, it will have succeeded. So why does all of this matter? Why spend 10 minutes preparing you for a film that has not even been released yet? Because when you sit down in that theater in 2026, you are going to know something that most of the audience will not. You will know that this is not a side story, not a cash grab, not an unnecessary expansion of the lore. This is the story of how Middle-earth was saved by a man doing hard, invisible work that no one would ever thank him for. The hunt for Gollum reveals something essential about Aragorn, something the original trilogy could only hint at in fleeting moments. Aragorn is not a hero because he swings a sword well. He is not worthy of the throne because of his bloodline. He is worthy because he spent decades doing the labor that no one else would do. He walked the long paths. He slept in the rain. He followed cold trails into the dark year after year with no glory and no guarantee of success. This is the true mark of the Dúnedain. Not their longevity, not their strength, but their willingness to bear the weight of vigilance so that others might live in peace. The hobbits of the Shire never knew that Aragorn hunted Gollum for 17 years. They never knew that a ranger had spent nearly 2 decades keeping a shadow from their door. They simply lived, tending their gardens, smoking their pipeweed, celebrating their birthdays, trusting that the world beyond their borders was somehow safe, and it was safe because Aragorn made it so. When you watch The Hunt for Gollum, you will see this sacrifice unfold. You will see the years of patience, the cold camps, the false leads, the moments when giving up would have been so easy, so understandable. And you will see why. When Aragorn finally claims the throne of Gondor in The Return of the King, he has already proven himself 1,000 times over. Not in the light of glorious battle, but in the patient, grinding dark of the wild. When that 30-second montage plays in the Two Towers, it will never look the same again. You will see 17 years compressed into heartbeats. You will see the weight he carried. You will see the war he won in silence. And when the hunt for Gollum arrives in 2026, you will walk into that theater as one of the few who truly understands what they are about to witness. Not a side quest, not filler, but the invisible war that saved everything. If this deep dive has enriched your understanding of what is coming, I invite you to subscribe to Arda Explained. Ring the bell for notifications. And join me as we continue to prepare for Middle-earth's return, one untold tale at a time. Until next time, may your paths be green and golden. This is The Chronicler, signing off.